Welcome back to Chewing It Over. I'm Jack Chew, and I apologise straight out the gates for the fact that intro music is no quieter, is it? I still haven't been able to sort that out. We can't find the video. It exists on this module. If I stop using it, then we just need a replacement. So I'm sorry about that. It's been oft complained about. But all the worst shows start with an apology, so I'm sorry about that. See what I did there? I've got a great show planned for our return. I was off on holiday for a couple of weeks. That's why we've been off. And instead of me trying to press the team to try and replace it and stuff, I thought, well, everyone's having bits of time off in August. I don't think the audience will envy us that. So we haven't had any shows for a couple of weeks, which means we creep ever closer to the 200th episode, but it's not there yet because we had a couple of weeks off. So I'm pleased to be back, especially for this show. As you might see in the title below me, it says the show must go on, but with consequences, ? Right? The ominous question that we're asking. And we're asking that of Liz Bayley, who's been on the show before and is a physiotherapist working currently in the West End. And she's someone who I really wanted to ask the question as to what's been going on over there in the West End, because it's such a perfect example of the cultural opening up process that we're having in the UK, but then also the associated occupational and sporting, for want of a better term, artistic related challenges that people do when they're doing interesting things with their bodies, right? What's going on there? What's she been experiencing? What insights can she share with us? And what can we all learn from it, as well as it being interesting in and of itself? So kindly, she's joining me once again, and hopefully in the click of a couple of buttons, we can speak to Liz. Can you hear me?
Hi, Jack. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Thanks for joining me. Yeah, absolutely. Is this 2-time or 3-time Tune It Over guest?
This is only the second time.
Only the second, right?
Only
okay.
two.
Well, only two. I'll look forward to the hat trick as long as I don't upset you today. Just for those that don't know, just tell folk a little bit about your background, and then we'll jump straight into the subject matter.
My background, yeah. Okay, so I'm trying to get quicker at saying this, so let's use this as a trial. So I have danced my whole life. I was a professional dancer for 15 years, and then when I started to get injured myself, I got interested in injuries and anatomy, physiology, all that kind of stuff, and decided to retrain as a sports therapist. And then about 5 or 6 years later, I decided to do a master's in physio, which is how I got to be in a physio now. So obviously my background is in performance and dance. So I ultimately wanted to end up working with dancers because it just seems the best use of my skills. I'm very happy to say that I do that. I have done it for about 12 years clinically. I worked out, like, from being a sports therapist to now, it's been 11 or 12 years I've actually worked with dancers in a sort of a clinical setting. So and now, just for the last couple of months, I've been working on The Lion King in London. So I'm now the resident physio on The Lion King, but that's with a company called West End Osteopathy. So that company has lots of different shows in the West End, but I spend most of my time with The Lion King in London and lots of other ones as well.
Fantastic. Well, such a perfect person, therefore, to talk to about this, because we're just saying off air that we're both happy with the term "a perfect storm" because it feels that you've had this massive psychosocial pressure, for want of a better term, right? The circumstances surrounding people as it's been stressful, and we reopen and the shows are about to or are getting going again. That also then couples with a spike in literal training load because of the nature of them having been off for a period of time. So I just wanted to open with that question, really, is if we're already sort of saying it's a perfect storm, what are the factors that are affecting it, and how's it all going down there?
Yeah, it's a good question. And we kind of knew it was coming because when you and I spoke, I think it was April that we last spoke on Chewing It Over, and I was sort of just waiting to get back into the dance while shows weren't open. They weren't even in rehearsals. And we talked about it then. But we kind of knew it was going to be a problem. When I got the job, I was speaking with my boss about, we were screening dancers over the phone just to see how they were doing and get an idea of what they'd been doing for 15 months with their bodies. And it kind of came back that a lot of them were like, yeah, we've been on top of it. We've been walking our 10,000 steps a day, and I've been doing my yoga and my stretching. And in the back of my head, I was thinking, oh, Lord, that's not a show fit kind of regime, but that is very typical of what a dancer would do to stay fit. So I sort of wasn't really surprised by it. So you had this sort of extended period where they weren't dancing and they weren't in shows, but they were also limited in what they could do training wise. So a lot of them couldn't get to the gym, or they would have had gym memberships, and when they opened, they would have gone, but they didn't have money because they weren't working. there were those times in isolation when they were only allowed to leave the house once a day. So if they were able to run, or, there were all these limitations on what they could do physically. And then, of course, they come back into rehearsals, and the rehearsals are full on because they have to be. You can't change the way that a show is taught because of a situation like lockdown. So you have a massive spike in the activity they're being asked to do. And of course, people aren't really fit enough, and injuries happen. And I was on various different shows, like I say, Lion King is just one of them, as all of them went into rehearsals at the same period. So that doesn't often happen. Usually in London, shows are open, and then they close and they open and they go into rehearsrsals all at different times because it depends on the schedules. But of course, this time, they all kind of went into rehearsals around June, July. So my boss, the company that handles all these shows, is suddenly like inundated with people who are in a rehearsal situation, which we know usually gives you more injuries than a performance situation. But they're all at the same time. So it was pretty full on.
Difficult. Yeah, I think that's definitely an interesting factor that I hadn't considered, is that you're not going to get that space in, and therefore you're going to have a pressure and a workforce pressure from therapy as well on therapy, as a lot of people are facing in other sectors as well. Is that as the world opens up, people doing interesting things with their bodies again. We're seeing that across sport as well as it happens, not just professionally, but of course in the amateur ranks and semi-pro and stuff, all getting going again. We want to make sure, and I wanted to say ahead of time, that we want to try and be quite non-specific on the case studies, because it's something that we want to be sensitive to things not being identifiable, and so we are speaking generally, and it's appropriate for us to do so.
Yeah.
But in general, when I think even about, say, runners, there are some types of runners that are just, running is the way in which they manifest their energy, and if they take the running away, they will find a proxy for it. And then there's others that they're just running devotees, right? If they weren't running, they struggle. It takes for someone like us to say, what if you did something else? And then the penny drops, right? And they don't mean to, but they just love that. Is dancing similar in that you've got some dancers that would then you find its equivalent when underexposed to it, but then also, do you also have dancers that then they dance because they love to dance, and therefore replacing that load or that activity in any which way, it wasn't easy for them?
Yes, and I suppose the big difference here is that to dance, you need space. There is space outside, but I mean, in reality, how often do you go to a park and dance? Now, I actually do that. Okay, I've been known to do that in my wellies. Like, I've danced around Wimbledon Common when I used to walk my dog, because there was no one around, and I had music on, and I'd just be like, "Oh, I just want to dance," and I would. I'm sure I'm not alone. I'm sure I'm not alone in that. That's kind of what dancers do. You've got a bit of space, and you think, "Oh, I could do a bit of dance." But when you talk about actually dancing to train your skill set and not to lose your technique, you actually need a big open space with quite an even floor of a certain type of material. Like, it kind of needs to be wooden or something you can turn on. So there's a certain requirement for what you really do need in order to keep up your skill. And when the lockdown happened, I know for a fact that Scottish Ballet, because I'm friends and talked to the physios there, sent out all their dancers flooring and bars so that they had the stuff at home that they needed to be able to do it. But that doesn't cover when you start doing things like the stuff that travels across the room, the big leaps and the jumps, which is called the allegro and the grande allegro. This is in ballet. But the same is said of musical theatre. So anything that requires big leaps or travelling steps, you cannot do that in a lockdown situation unless you go to the park, like I might have done. But even then, you're in trainers, you're on grass. It's not the same.
No.
So trying to recreate that at home is almost impossible. And there's been various things done to try and replicate it. Like, I'd found this. There's like a 5-part course which was done by One Dance, and I can't remember the name of the practitioner who did it, but it was called a 5-week jump maintenance program for dancers who were in lockdown. So it was effectively getting you to use your jump technique and your power and your speed, your rate of force production, so that you didn't lose it over lockdown. And it was a whole thing of warming up and then various different jump sequences and explosive things to try and get people to do that. And it's not traveling, it's all sort of static on the spot, but it certainly replicated some of the things that you would need in order to do the grand allegro, the allegro, and the traveling steps in shows or at a high level of dance. And I thought that was brilliant. One Dance was so good to put that out there. I saw it retrospectively after it had already been done. It was back in July at some point. So there were ways of doing it, but it's far from ideal. And
it challenges all of us for, and it will be a good test when the final analysis comes for us to understand those that always want to lump skills together to say that you should all train them in the whole, and then there's those that delineate it almost too far, you would argue, into the nitty-gritty, and then there's always someone in between. There were certain circumstances, this being one of them, where the whole task could not be replicated with any ease, especially not with any specificity. I remember in the Olympics, you're watching, I didn't even think about it until you're watching the Olympics, and it was Holly Bradshaw, and it was like she couldn't pole vault for a time. It's like, in what world could you replicate that? She's in a garden going through the motions, and the amount of visualization she must have done and stuff. And so she's trying to simulate parts of it because she can't do the whole. I imagine it's a little version of that, isn't it? Or very similar. Yeah. But like you're describing, is that, static jump sequences in a small room is still better than not doing them, and to not train both body tissue and the mind, of course, to go through those motions and to stay in touch with it. What would you say if I forced you on sort of, say, percentages or ratios in terms of how many managed it? And I'm not bringing with it any judgment at all on the athletes, because it's such a unique circumstance. But what percentage of them nailed it and did all that they could? What percentage of them really struggled with it, and what might be in between?
It's really hard to put a percentage on it. I can't think. I'd say a very low percentage did what they needed to do to be show fit. Almost none. To be honest, like maybe 10% if we're being quite generous with it. But I think that's partly to do with the first thing is not knowing, and this is where I get on my soapbox, and I'm like, dancers don't know what it takes to be show fit, and we can talk about it in a minute. A big part of that is they just didn't know. So when I was asking them, okay, what have you been doing to stay fit over lockdown? They'd be like, yeah, I've been doing my stretches, but they were really proud of that. They didn't think there was anything wrong with it, And these are the dancers that are going to go and have to jump with a massive heavy costume on, holding puppets, or literally. And when I say puppets, it makes it sound like, let's use Lion King as an example, because it's out there, people know the show. They're holding two gazelles which weigh like, I don't know how many kilos each, and there's a gazelle on their head. Yeah,
it's not Sooty and Sweep, is it?
Yeah, it's not sock puppets. Like I'm talking the gazelles are like 1.5 meters long. Yeah. They're heavy. I did this. I held them. I was like, let me try it, because I wanted to see. So you're holding these two huge, great big things which are really unbalanced. You've got one on your head, which is really difficult to suspend. And then they're going to be doing like leap after leap after leap after leap to represent the gazelles in the show, right? And these guys are the ones that are going, yeah, I've been doing my stretches. Like, it doesn't even come close to what you need. Think about the shoulder strength, the core strength, the neck stability, the power that they need in their lower limbs to get up with the extra weight. So, but they didn't know that. And I kind of, in my head, I was going, why didn't they know that? And I got a bit frustrated. And then I was like, Jesus, Liz, think about what you were like when you were a professional dancer. I was the laziest dancer in the world. In between contracts, I would do nothing. In fairness, I was only 23. So I sort of had, I had age on my side, and I was sort of young and fit. But I wasn't, by the way. I'm fitter now than I ever was as a dancer.
Sure.
I'm going off on a tangent now.
Let's just poke into that tangent a little bit, because I think that some of what might surprise people is that complacency is a bit of a privilege of not then having a natural descent into weight gain and other factors like that, isn't it? Is that something that either you or others can be, because of the disposition of being a dancer? Does that, because it might surprise the layperson that would be even an option. Because
what you mean, to not do anything?
Yeah, so like you said, to regress that far would sometimes surprise, because then you would then really not be never mind show fit, but just able to retain and be able to go again. But I mean, age does help with that, I guess.
Age helps. Like the funny thing was that I just, in my head, I was like, oh, but I'm fit because I'm a dancer, and I I've got the body type. I'm very fortunate where actually I don't put on weight, but so I didn't have to do it for aesthetic reasons, I guess. But I never considered, I never even thought, and I forget how much I've learned. You know, I'm like, why don't they know? And I'm like, oh, but it's taken me 12 years to get to this point. So I totally take it for granted that they would think to even, that they would need to condition themselves to be able to jump high or fast or for a long time or repetitively or with extra weight or consider any of those things, because I definitely didn't. And I didn't do a show like The Lion King when I was dancing professionally, but as you know, I did Moulin Rouge, which has some similarities in the amount of athleticism needed in certain numbers and the big costumes we used to wear. And I got injured because of those for sure. And I just wasn't strong. So yes, does that answer the question?
Definitely, no, it definitely does. That's what I was getting at with that, with the tangent. I think, why is it then? Let's just try and see if we can offer an idea as to why that might be.
Lack of education from my side.
Yeah, but then it's like you said, though. Would you think it'd be more instinctive than that, though? Wouldn't it? Like what? Yeah. They're not even. It's not even close to a simulated movement, is it? Like if they're just maintaining their body, is that a complacency, a degree of arrogance about that fitness?
No, it's not. It's not. It's cultural. That's what it is.
Right.
So, and I've come to figure this out from speaking to other people. So I did a podcast with Matt recently on Sports Therapy Association. We were talking about this, and I think it's a culture thing and it's a tradition thing. So dancers traditionally will dance to stay fit and maintain their show fitness, but traditionally wouldn't really cross train except for Pilates. So I did a tweet.
That's right. Yeah, I saw you.
So I did this tweet, which really kind of blew up because I think people really got it, which was fantastic.
Yeah.
And I basically said, you know what? It's taken years and years, and I mean like 50 years, for Pilates to become the absolute go-to for dancers. There's not a dancer that hasn't done it. Everyone uses it. Everyone thinks it's the be-all and end-all of injury prevention. We now know it does help train you and condition you a little bit, but it's not the be-all and end-all of injury prevention by any means, not even close. Most of Pilates is done lying down, right? So how can it possibly replicate the demands of a performance? It just doesn't. And I get so passionate about it because I get it now and I'm trying to teach people this. So the poor dancers at Lion King are like, oh my Lord, like she's always on at us because she wants us to do more. And like yesterday I did a conditioning class for one of the shows that I work with, and I was getting them to do jump maintenance, strength stuff, plyometrics, all that kind of thing. And I was like, it's not going to be dancey, just go with me. And they seemed to find it quite challenging. And there was a bit where I was meant to do a full hour, and at about half hour, I was thinking, oh, Jesus, this is really hard. But the reason I pushed it is because that particular show is off because of COVID. And I was like, if you guys had a show tonight, I wouldn't push it. But you don't have a show tonight, so let's do it. And that's one of the other barriers. It's a huge, huge barrier, is that they've got these shows and they do 8 shows a week. And when they're in rehearsals, they're dancing up to like 10, 12 hours a day. So when the hell do you do the conditioning work? You know, like you've got.
And how do you make sure your conditioning work isn't the thing that overloads them? That's the thing that's interesting, isn't it? Trying to bring in different stimuli, which is what you and you know, you and Matt are kindred spirits on this. And I think I did mention that whilst I was away on Twitter when I had a look and I saw that tweet thread going off, and I agree with it. And it did remind me of Matt Phillips making similar points years ago on Physio Matters about that, which was interesting because you've got that almost that culture, as you mentioned it, as to why that is the staple diet for exercise of dancers, and therefore that's what we do. We dance and we stretch, and if we do cross training, it's because we're doing some slow, low load, controlled movements for stability. And often it's that contrast as well, isn't it, that they maybe are trying to appeal to. It's I do loads of explosive, intense work in my job, therefore I'm going to do the flip reverse of that. Whereas actually it's maybe that's too much of a contrast. I wonder if I could just ask actually before I do, as often happens, especially because I'm getting excited to be back on air, I'm not asking the audience. So dear live audience, sorry for ignoring you to now. If you got any questions and comments, then please do post them. Especially want to ask you directly, do you recognize any of these what might seem like niche variables in a way, because we're applying them quite specifically here to a quite unique circumstance? Are you recognizing any of these overload factors affecting wherever it is that you work, particularly with regards to occupational factors? I want to ask, are you noticing as even even people, I've had people mentioning to me, and we noticed in the Physio Matters survey recently that we've been doing, that people are saying about the people complaining about their commutes again, right? Getting stuck in traffic again. Do you know what I mean? Like people just asking different things of their bodies, not even in high load circumstances, but circumstances have changed and changed quickly again, haven't they? So I just want to ask anyone that's listening live, then please do, join the conversation. I will come to your comments in the last 5. Liz, before we go there though, what I want to ask is there an atmosphere in the sort of West End with regards to any bitterness, resentment? Is there politics in the air generally because of the circumstance? And we needn't go into our take on those matters. Me and you have been fairly vocal in that direction, and we could go there, but we've not got long enough, I guess. So I'm just meaning, like, is there resentment might feel like a heavy word, but it's just like there's been a massive disruption to people's careers at a time which is a short career often for performers. So just wondered if I could get your take on that.
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, very, very vocally, so I'm not going to be saying anything I shouldn't hear, but Andrew Lloyd Webber has been incredibly vocal about just how terribly the arts have been treated through the whole process, and it's completely screwed his shows up. Cinderella and Joseph are both off at the moment. So
at a moment's notice as well,
at a moment's notice, and it happened to I can say this again because it's public knowledge, it's on social media. It's happened to Lion King. So we opened, we made opening night, which I didn't think was going to happen, and then we only did about a week of shows, and then we had to close because of various COVID testing,
which further delays our planned drinks, which upsets me as well.
Yes, and weirdly, 2 people for that I know from Twitter would have seen the show last week, so I would have met 2 different my Twitter friends that I had never met. I was so excited, and then the show. I mean, not that that's the most important thing, but
it is. But
I mean, it is. Yeah, but so yes, I mean, to get back to what you're saying, it's so the arts has basically not been treated great. It's kind of been pushed under the carpet a little bit. So there is a little bit of an air of resentment, but I think that's trumped totally by the excitement of being back. Everyone is just so thrilled to be there. Like, we were in the theatre one day, it was a Sunday, and a dance captain said to me, "Oh, it's Sunday," and he was like, "But we're here." You know, just we were so happy to be in the theatre. It's just it's such a gift. And there probably is a little. I reckon it probably has a slight impact on how people feel about their injuries when they happen. I reckon it's almost like there's an external locus of control, isn't there? Like, it wasn't their fault, they couldn't train, that it was COVID. There's an element of that a little bit, just generally. There's definitely a little bit of kind of blame, which is totally justified, I think. Like, as much as I was like, you could do jumping at home, people didn't, and there's many, many reasons that they didn't, which is why they're getting injured more. But I think that probably there's an element in the back of people's heads. It's made injuries more complicated in that way, because it's more multifactorial. There's almost an element of blame, isn't there? It's not their fault. The government did this, and there was COVID, and they couldn't dance, and they couldn't train, and we were taken off, and then everything's been a mess. And so there definitely is there's something going on. Like the night that Lion King closed, there were tears, because it's just the frustration of being open. You're there, and of course, and that's from the cast and the audience. I mean, the audience were on the doorstep about to come in.
Well, I'll admit that not just that story, but stories like it on some shows and some sporting circumstances where that has then been dealt yet another crushing blow and stuff. It's really getting to me. It was a few weeks back, especially because I think mainly, and I say this kind of being in touch with someone that's I've always been. Say more into sport than I'm into art, right? Especially when it comes to, say, painting, right? You're going to get me playing football rather than painting. The bridge between, so the thing that's made me more sensitive as I've grown older to art is almost through physical performance, right? So I've started to respect art and form and become a bit more cultured in that direction, in part because I married well, and so I went to shows, right? But generally speaking, I kind of came to understand that through dance and through performance, and started to respect it because it was athletic. I could get in touch with that and be interested in that, and then started to then get to know and enjoy the story as well. What I'm getting at is I see in some of the cultural critique and it's seen as being frivolous and hedonistic and sort of an accessory and something that's just a bonus. It's like a 1% on the top of things.
Yeah.
Whereas actually, I just disagree with that on a fundamental philosophical level and moral level about the fact that no, it's what we live for. Right? These aren't accessory add-ons that are sort of really frivolous and hedonistic. Instead, I think they're fundamental to the culture. They're things that make us tick. They're the ways in which we express ourselves. They're the stories of our time that can help us to transmit really important emotions. And I think that is something that quality, high-end professional performers are living that in quite a deep way. And it's not just a case of, oh, what am I doing with my body today? It's that they're embodying parts that they play and they act and they perform on stage and stuff. And I think that must be so exhausting. Never mind the physical, right? The emotional turmoil of yo-yoing with that must be massive. Now, I've just gone off on one a little bit there to make sure my point is clear and declared to the audience that I think these are factors that have been underplayed, and I'm therefore not surprised and deeply sympathetic to anyone in the cast that are having those emotions played with on a regular basis. It would be bizarre if that wasn't affecting their injury profile. Yeah. Which is obviously what I'm sort of inviting there with you, is that why wouldn't it? And by the sound of things, it is.
I think it is physically, but like I say, I think just the mental load of it. So you're finally back, and then you get an injury that potentially could make you miss your opening night. So obviously, loads of theatres had their opening nights, and building up to that, you've got 6 weeks of rehearsals, and it peaks, like it really, really snowballs the rehearsals leading up to opening night. You get into tech runs, and you're on stage just standing there in a heavy costume, waiting for them to light you. It's really physical and intense, and then. So you've been through, imagine they've just done 15 months of COVID. They're in a show, they've done 6 weeks of rehearsals, and they might not make their opening night. And that happened to a good few different shows, few different people. Again, I'm not saying anything that's not known, really. But it's amazing what a performer will push through to get on for opening night. They amazed me. I was like, this one's not going to go on, and this one's not going to go on. They all went on. And they were fine.
That's the show must go on.
But that is, honestly, I've never seen like this particular opening night session, like over all the different shows that we worked on. July opening was mainly it. How many performers I would normally have taken off, and they begged me to go on. And in fairness, it might have made their injury a bit worse, but it was nothing.
And did you learn a lot from that then?
Yes, I was I'll never sign anyone off again.
Yeah, that's helpful, isn't it? Sometimes to think, oh, maybe I was hypercautious. I never thought.
Totally. I mean, in reality, actually, a couple of them probably still need to come off and rehab properly, but they can still do the show, and that's what they're there for. Like you said, it's a limited timeline of a career, and I'm so glad that the people that went on for opening nights that I wanted to take off did. And I was like, look, this is the risk. We know what the company knows. I know you know what the risks are, but you want to do it. That's fine. We've got a plan in place if you do need to come off. And they all did it. And I was like, it's like, that's a real interesting mental one. Like just the adrenaline that'll get you through. You know, people's parents had flown over from different countries to see them in opening nights, and they will push through stuff to get those shows done. And I definitely learned from it.
It's years back, but not this Olympics, but an Olympic trialist that I got better for that I didn't think was ready, and we just gave it a whirl because it was such high stakes, and that went brilliantly, and I learned that lesson that I was being overcautious. And similarly, a cup final a few years ago where the same thing had happened, whereby, you know, if anything, they just surprised everyone, and everyone was probably coddling them. And you've got to learn from those things, and sometimes it takes for this context to be so specific for us to give it a whirl. And so there are some upsides to that, as well as unfortunately the stories where unfortunately they push themselves or the circumstance pushes them into a mistake. But let's come to some of these comments and questions then. We're not going to be able to get to them all, I'm afraid. But Jo asked earlier, she said, with dancers, is there a perfectionist element? If I can't do it right, I won't do anything. She did change her mind when you started to mention about the fact that on the off season, people down tools a bit. But is there a factor like that she's describing?
It's really individual, I think. I don't know. Not necessarily. I'm just trying to think of generally people that I know who I've danced with and people that I know working as a physio. I think, like, using me as an example, you'll know from Twitter, like quite off over the lockdown, I was going crazy and I ended up dancing with the wall. Do you remember that?
I did.
So I was dancing tango and I used the wall as my partner so that I had something to push against. And I was like, I will dance whether it's with a person or with the wall in my living room. And I'm going to just put it on social media because it's what you do. But so nothing.
Because you're a performer, because you show it. That's good.
You do it for people to see, right? So there was an element that was a long way from being perfect. So I wanted to dance in a like a room with a partner doing tango, but it wasn't an option. So I made it work another way. I even put my full gear on. I put on a tango dress, heels, everything, and filmed it. And it made me help my mental health. I was really low that day. I remember thinking, God. So I don't think it's perfect or nothing at all. Probably is for some people. It's really individual, isn't it?
Yeah, fair play. But the only thing that was sort of very much perfect was our pose off, of course, which will go down in history. Ash James has said the weighted calf raises I do really help the moonwalking in my living room to Billie Jean when no one else. A perfect example of what we're talking about, Ash. Thank you for that. Yeah, very specific to his dancing. He does then follow up with a slightly smarter point. With his occupational health hat on, dancers are the ultimate industrial athletes. Interestingly, with that high-performance environments I've worked in, mainly rugby, cross-training is well accepted. But in hockey health, similar culture to dancers. And then he says, when do I fit it in?
This is the thing. It's the fitting it in. And that's logistically what I am now trying to work out with the company, the dance captains, and my boss, our company. How do we do it? We know we need to do it, but there is no time. The only thing I've come up with so far is that probably for this contract, which is a year long, this is for every show going, we're probably too late, in fairness. But next year, when those dancers get the audition, the day they're told they've got those jobs, I will be there with an online and written down and Zoom version of a conditioning class / program that they will have to complete before they come to rehearsals. That's the only solution I've got. Because before they start that job, they're usually off. They've usually got at least a few weeks, sometimes longer. And that's the only time I can see when we can get them up to scratch and stronger that won't overload them, that it will affect their rehearsals. So that's my plan.
Brilliant,
is to kind of, use what I learned this season, all the different shows, what are the demands of this part, because they're not all the same.
No, of course.
And literally make individualized programs. If you get the role of so-and-so, this is the conditioning plan for you. And you can individualize it, but I reckon that would be brilliant. We take a lot of buy-in and stuff, but I'm willing to do it.
Well, especially if you go that step, if you're able to, I mean, it sounds so close to perfect, but if you went there even that step further and then tailored it to some of their, say, injury history and stuff, so you then get the profile of the part and the profile of the recruit. Is it recruit or what would you call it? And then if you mention those things, brilliant. No, as ever, I'm afraid we're out of time, and that's a shame. We could talk for hours about this and many other things, but just point people in the direction of where they can find out a little more about you, mate.
Twitter's the place, isn't it? I guess so. Liz Bayley, Liz Bayley Twitter, Liz Bayley Physio. I've got a website which is lizbayleyphysio.com, which needs massive updating. Don't look at it yet. What else? That would probably do. You can Google me. And
of course a star webinar at physiomatters.com.
Did my therapy live talk with you guys, yeah. It
was mega. So thanks as ever, you star. It's been brilliant to chat with you, and good luck with it all, especially when it gets back going again.
Thank you.
All the best. Bye.
See ya.